Ajahn,
Ready?
Okay, everyone ready?
Yeah.
So perhaps, Ajahn, we can start with some practice questions about meditation. So the first question is, any hints or tips with regard to the whole body breathing if we don't want to fall asleep?
The whole purpose of whole body breathing is not to fall asleep. The problem is some people have trouble having that whole body awareness and maintaining that without blurring out, in which case I would advise going back to the survey of the body section by section and then get good at that. And then you can move on to whole body. And if you can't do a whole body thing, whole torso, torso plus head, torso plus legs, arms, sort of add things on bit by bit.
Thank you, Ajahn. Okay, just speaking about the breath just now, breathing meditation. When meditating on breath, the attention moves throughout the body to where there may be tension or energy movement or whole body breathing. Instructions is to focus on one area of the breath, maintaining whole body awareness. What is your advice? One area or the whole body?
Okay, if you run into tension, try to maintain a sense of the breathing as being comfortable. And then you can move your attention to the spot that is tense and see if you can relieve the tension. And then when that's done, then you'll go back to the whole body. The image I like to use is of a spider on a web. The spider is in one spot in the web. And then something happens, hits the web, the spider goes over, takes care of that, and then returns to its spot. So if you're trying to maintain a whole body awareness, then you have to focus it to deal with a specific problem. And sometimes it helps to have a sense that the whole body is comfortable as you're dealing with the problem. Other times you have to focus very specifically on the problem. So there will be, it depends on the situation.
It's very dynamic.
Right.
Depends on what is needed at the time.
Right.
Yes. Okay. If the mind is comfortable, should the mind go to the whole body or at one particular spot?
Try to have a whole body awareness. Now there will be one spot that is emphasized more than other spots, but keep the whole body in mind. It's like looking at a painting. You may focus on one spot in the painting, but you can see the whole painting.
And as we keep practicing, the body, sometimes we lose sense of it as a natural thing, just falls away. So in that instance, do we then move away from the whole body awareness to something that is more just observing the breath without the connection to the body?
Well, as long as the breath is coming in, going out, you want to have a sense of where your body is, where your different limbs are. The breath will get more and more calm. And finally, when the breath stops, that's when the sense of the shape of the body begins to dissolve a little bit. Now, for a while, you want to maintain the sense of the body being really, really still and really comfortable. And then you can start thinking, okay, erase your sense of the outline of the body. And the body will feel like a cloud of sensation dots. And then you can focus in on the space between the dots, and that takes you to space.
Great, thank you. Ajahn, recently I found contemplating on the air elements helps me with my restlessness. Could you please explain how could I use this contemplating insight?
So focusing on the wind element.
The air element to assist with restlessness.
Okay, well, just think of the energy flow being really smooth and nourishing. Because a lot of restlessness is that you feel like there's no place where you can keep your awareness comfortable. So you've got to provide yourself with some comfort, someplace. And then has a sense of ease in the flow of the air, the flow of the wind. And that should help with the restlessness.
Okay. Thank you. After focusing on the breath for some time, the body starts to pendulum as if falling asleep through, though I'm fully alert and focused on the breath. If unattended, the body can just fall. This disrupts the focus and meditation, as I always need to watch out for the body from falling. How can I address this situation to stabilize the body, completely let go and continue to follow the breath?
You can't completely let go. If you completely let go, you turn into a puddle on the floor. So there has to be some tension to the awareness that keeps your body erect.
Yeah.
and keep it stable.
And Ajahn, I heard that meditation can help with health problems such as cancer that needs to be shrinked. Could you please explain how could this happen, and how deep is the meditation that will help this? Does it have to be jhana?
Well, any sense that the breath energy is flowing well in the body is going to be good for your health. And the fact that the mind is settling down is also going to be good for your health as well. Now, we can't guarantee complete cure, but we can guarantee that this is going to help, at least to some extent, so that the state of your mind is not aggravating the disease. And sometimes with the flow of the breath energy, it enables the blood and the other functions of the body to flow smoothly.
And what's the difference between first, second, and third meditation in terms of technique and teaching? I felt very deeply connected when I got into my third meditation and observed all of my skeletons.
First, second, and third, which we're talking
Just
about?
says
Last night's first, and this morning second, and the bones were third.
That's all it has.
That's all the question.
Fess up. This question, maybe, or perhaps whoever wrote this question, if you'd like to clarify, maybe just pop it into another piece of paper to clarify. Oh, here we go.
Okay, that's observing the bodies. Okay, got it.
Yeah. I see the first one, so observing the breathing and your body sensations, and the second one is working in the meditation, walking, and the third one is observing the skeleton.
Okay.
So I found when I'm observing, this is my first time to observing skeleton, but I feel I go really deep, very, very deep. And I don't know why I don't have this experience before. So I want to know.
Okay, it sounds like this is a good meditation technique for you. Because it's different techniques will work for different people.
Oh, is that?
And if you find that this works well for you, maintain that technique.
Okay, thank you.
Years back, I was teaching a course on what are called the 10 recollections. And one of the recollections is mindfulness immersed in the body. And I was using this bone technique as one of the meditations. And when the session was over, one of the women was crying. And so we asked her, why are you crying? And she said, well, this is the first time I've ever had such deep meditation. And I thought she was crying for joy. Turns out her background was as a Tibetan Buddhist. And here she was doing a Mahayana, Hinayana technique. And she was afraid that this was a sign that she was not ready for the higher forms of Buddhism. I don't think it's a valid idea. Whatever meditation technique, whatever concentration techniques works for you, follow that.
No body, and then you don't have it in mind, but you feel something is very solid. You just follow the solid and you just go here.
Yeah, I never experienced this, just this first time. I never had this skeleton, like observing the technique before. So it just feels like there's no feeling at all. You only see the solid things. And even I feel that everyone's the same, like all skeleton.
You're right.
Yeah, I just wait.
Yeah. Keep it up.
And perhaps related to that is, what is the best type of meditation? And this is coming from Ethan, year 1, with a little skeleton.
This kind of meditation is a meditation that works. So whatever technique works for you, do that.
And on that point, could you comment, if you'd like to, on the Goenka meditation method?
No.
Okay, I thought so. I thought I'll slip that in next one. What would you suggest to put more joy and equanimity into one's meditation?
Think about how fortunate you are that you can meditate
Mm.
and that you're able, one, to do a practice that's good for you, and two, it's a practice that's good for other people. And and this opportunity doesn't always come. So learn how to talk to yourself in a way that encourages you to meditate, to see the value of it.
Very good, thank you. Another question. Ajahn, what makes meditation work easier for some people and difficult for some? What preparation can we do to make it work for those who seem to have strong hindrances?
Okay, part of it is looking back at your generosity and looking at your virtue. If you live a life, if you've been stingy, if you've been breaking the precepts, it's much more difficult for the mind to settle down with a sense of well-being.
Mm.
But if you have made a practice of being generous, made a practice of following the precepts, and also exercising what's called sense restraint. When you look at something, when you listen to something, ask yourself, why am I looking? Why am I listening? Is my greed doing the looking? Is my anger doing the listening? In a case like that, you say, look, this is just going to aggravate the mind, make it more difficult to settle down when I do try to meditate. Mm. This doesn't mean you don't look or listen at all. It's just you look at your motivation for these activities, and try to look with some wisdom, listen with some wisdom. And then as you come back to the meditation, then it's a lot easier to settle down.
Mm. Thank you. Okay, another practice question. On occasions when the meditation is quite good, the mind is alert, do we just stay with this awareness? Do we need to introduce something for the mind to work on when the mind is rather peaceful? Is there a stage when we need to investigate, for example, the 32 parts of the body?
Right. I mean, you're getting the mind in a state of well-being so that it can work.
Mm.
But the question is how much well-being, how much peace you need before you want to put it to work. That's going to depend on the state of the mind. Sometimes you come back from a long day's work and you say, all I need to do today is just get the mind really still and to basically recover from the day. Other times when you have more energy, then you can start investigating issues. Like the 32 parts of the body, you can investigate the concentration itself. Like when you get the mind in a state of concentration, you can ask yourself, is there still some disturbance in the concentration itself? Is there a more refined way that I can concentrate the mind with less effort, with less activity? So you can analyze either the concentration or bring in other topics to analyze as well.
Great advice. And similar to what you were saying earlier, our practice has to be dynamic to meet the conditions.
Right.
Yeah. Is it normal to feel while meditating that your body is vibrating?
It happens easily, yeah. And you don't focus on the vibrating, you focus on the breath. Mm-hmm. And the sense of vibration finally will calm down. Mm-hmm. But just take that as one of your signs that this is, for me, this is one of the signs that my mind is settling down. Mm-hmm. But it's like riding down the road. When you come across a sign, you don't get off the road and put on the sign. You stay on the road.
Yeah, great. And would awareness of the whole body in terms of volume, shape, like Dr. Femi's method be useful?
Sure, whatever helps you settle down with a sense of broad awareness, it's fine.
And when building energy with whole body breathing and energy building, how far can this go? I always seem to let go as fear of exploding.
Okay, if you feel like there's too much energy, you've got to let it out. And usually the usual exit points are the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. If it feels like it's too much, think of it going down the arms, out the palms of your hands, down your legs, out the soles of the feet.
Thank you. Sometimes there appears to be a gap between meditation practice and the purpose and goal of meditation. That is, why focus on the body and breath to achieve nibbana? How important it is for this purpose and goal to be clear when meditating, and how can this be strengthened?
Okay, so it's a good analogy. When you're cleaning out your house, you have to focus on the dirt, okay? And then you get the dirt out of the way, then the house is clean. In the same way, we have so many issues around our relationship to the body. We have to straighten those out first before we can go on the issues that are more deeply in the mind.
Thank you. Some people may practice the Buddhist path and meditation, but not seem to make much progress, while others make significant progress. What are some of the differences between the two, and how can we ensure that one is more likely to make progress and maintain progress on the Buddhist path?
Okay, well, practice the entire path, not just the meditation, but also right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right all the right factors of the path. So if you find that any one of those factors is missing, you try to bring it up so that it's more complete. We have to remember also we are dealing with past karma sometimes. Some people have made a habit of meditating in a lot of previous lifetimes, so it's going to be a lot easier this time. Whereas other people don't have that background. In which case you say, well, the only way I can get that background is to give myself that background now. And be patient. And patient doesn't mean just sit and wait for things to happen. It means that you stick with something, confident that the results will have to come.
It's the Noble Eightfold Path, not just the one path.
Right.
Yes, thank you. And perhaps related to that, please elaborate on self-inquiry technique, cultivating prajna paramita, and higher body cultivation.
Run that past me again.
Yep, first one. Please elaborate on self-inquiry techniques. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Self-inquiry techniques. Again, anything that helps you understand what your mind is doing, how your mind is creating suffering, how your mind is creating unnecessary stress for itself, that kind of inquiry is useful. As long as, I mean, the kind of just wisdom and discernment we're trying to develop has to do with comprehending the way we're suffering, comprehending what we're doing to cause suffering so that we can abandon it, comprehending the path so we can develop it. So those are the things you focus on. And then the end of suffering will be realized.
Yes, thank you for the answer. And also, yesterday you were talking about the importance of self-honesty.
Right.
And is that also self-inquiry as a practice?
Well, again, if you look at yourself and ask yourself, how am I lying to myself? And be alert to the fact that it happens very easily. And it's so important that when the Buddha was teaching his son for the first time, that was the first issue brought up, was honesty. I don't know if you know the story. The Buddha was coming to visit Rahula, his son. And Rahula sees him coming in the distance, so he sets aside a pot of water with a dipper for him to wash his feet. So the Buddha washes his feet, and then shows at least a little bit of water in the dipper. And he tells Rahula, do you see how little water there is in the dipper? Yes. That's how little goodness there is in a person who tells a deliberate lie without any sense of shame. Now, if Rahula had told a lie that day, you can imagine. Then the Buddha takes the water and throws it away. So see how the water is thrown away? Yes. That's what happens to the goodness of someone who tells a deliberate lie with no sense of shame, gets thrown away. Then he shows him how empty it is. Yes, 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 and get the point. And so he says, you have to start with truthfulness as the quality of a contemplative, the quality of a meditator.
Yeah, I always love that analogy. And it's great for kids to learn that one too.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second part of that question is, can you elaborate on cultivating prajna paramita?
Well, and prajna paramita, the perfection of discernment, basically comes down to the Four Noble Truths. And learning the duties of those truths and then actually performing the duties of those truths. That's where the wisdom comes from.
And the third one is higher body cultivation.
High body contemplation.
Don't look at me, I don't know. I'm just reading it out.
I would not recommend getting high to contemplate the body.
Okay, next question. And so that's the practice questions. These now move to more about life. How can I open myself to more abundance without succumbing to attachment?
What kind of abundance do you want?
material, relationships,
Ooh.
life security, worldly pleasures.
Do I look like the kind of person who would be giving advice on that?
It's hard, isn't it? Especially sensual pleasures.
Well,
I mean, there's
appreciate the
drawbacks
wealth
to
of
it.
the mind. The Buddha talks about the qualities of the mind that are forms of internal wealth, things like conviction, a healthy sense of shame, a healthy sense of compunction, virtue, learning, generosity, discernment. These are the forms of wealth that you really want to develop.
Thank you. So I'm currently happy with the stability in my life. However, I am anticipating a change in a few months' time that will turn my world upside down. I will have to leave everything that I have ever known to start anew. How do I prepare for that mentally? To leave behind everything I know, to face the expected and be ready for the unexpected and the unknown.
Okay, what you know you will have to do in your new life is that you will need plenty of mindfulness, you will need plenty of alertness, you need plenty of concentration, discernment. You develop these qualities so that you will have them to fall back on as you go into that new life. Learn how to befriend your breath so that wherever you go, you've got a good friend to go with you.
I like that, thank you. Okay, Ajahn, you have explained about release, saying the Buddha was right, there is a deathless state. You gave us confidence in this truth. Once again, we would be grateful if you could give a Dharma talk here to help us practice with confidence in release and Nibbana.
Didn't I give one today? There are lots of Dhamma talks on dhammatalk.org. We passed the 5,000 mark just the other day.
Okay. You talked about building trust with a teacher. How do we do this? And second part of it is, what if they betray your trust? Should you keep trying?
Keep trying to find another teacher.
Yeah. So how do we build trust with a teacher?
Well, you just live with a person for a while and notice the person's behavior, notice the person's ability to deal with difficult situations, how fair they are when they get into arguments with other people, how fair they are in their dealings with other people, how consistent they are in their virtue. That's how you can make it a trust. So it takes a while. There's no instant trust button you can push.
Okay. In ancient India, as well as China, elements are used to describe the world, emotions, personal qualities, and these elements are like raft or tools to help reduce fabrication of I, me, and mine. How useful is it using these elements in reducing fabrication in the mind, as well as observing impermanence?
Okay, you observe the fact that the mind has certain potentials. And that's what the elements are. They're potentials that can be provoked or not provoked. And then you begin to realize that the physical elements you have in your body are no different from the physical elements in the things around you. Then you that begins to give you a sense of detachment from the body, because you realize this is part of the world. You've moved in, taken possession, but it's going to push you out at some time. It's good to realize on the one hand that you do have these elements in common with the world, but at the same time, you can learn how to use those potentials to develop skillful states of mind. And you notice that, as say, if you focus on the wind element, you do get a sense of eventually that there is breath energy throughout the body. If you hadn't had focused that way, if you hadn't had the perception, you wouldn't have noticed that. So this gives you some insight into the power of perception. So you can then use that power to take apart anything else where your attachments are.
Thank you. I have a regular practice for many years, and then I experienced a significant trauma a few years ago. Since then, I've been finding it difficult and too frightening to sit alone as I get overwhelmed. Although sitting in a group is much better, I'd really like to return to a daily sitting practice at home. Do you have any suggestions? Gratefully received.
Start with small practice sessions at home. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And the question is what you feel overwhelmed by. That would be good to know. You get an idea of what you have to learn how to avoid and what you have to learn how to develop. But basically, if there's a sense of physical trauma, wrap yourself up in a big blanket so you feel secure all around, and then you use that as part of your meditation. Think of yourself as being surrounded by protection. And you do a lot of contemplation of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha as refuge.
And are there any particular meditation techniques that would be better suited?
Well, just think about the virtues of the Buddha, virtues of the Dhamma, the virtues of the Sangha, and that these are your true protection. Your body is going to have to leave you, but the focus is on protecting your mind. And these are the qualities that protect your mind.
Thank you, Ajahn. Okay, another question. Are the 4 jhanas enough, or do we need to train to perfect the formless as well for awakening?
Well, the Buddha says even just the first jhana can be enough. But you never know how much stillness of mind you're going to need in order to see into your own mind. So try to get the mind as quiet as you can. But the jhanas, I mean, they're not like baseball cards. You don't collect them.
Can't swap them either.
So basically try to get the mind as quiet as you can, and then ask yourself, is there still some disturbance in the mind? And if there is, what can I do? What am I doing that's causing that disturbance? Can I stop doing that? And then the mind will get more quiet. And then you stay with that for a while. It's like moving into a very bright room. And at first it's so bright you can't see anything, but then after a while, your eyes get adjusted. You begin to see there are objects in the room. And then you can see, oh, here, there's still some disturbance that I'm causing here. Drop that. And you don't have to count jhanas, just notice my mind has these stages that it goes through. Because if you look at the canon, there are lots of different maps for how the mind quiets down. There's the 4 jhana map, there's the 5 jhana map, there's the 2 or 3 stages in terms of visualization that some people have. So you basically have your own personal concentration levels. But the important thing is you learn how to observe your mind while it's quiet. And some people are very observant, and based on the first jhana, they can get awakening. Other people need to get more quiet. So that should be the attitude you have towards them.
And is it correct to say, to connect what you've just said and an earlier answer, that any practice of the jhanas is to get the mind prepared in order to use the mind
To use it,
to
right.
develop insight? That's the key, not
Right.
just the jhanas.
Right.
Yeah. Our second part of this question relates to perfecting the formless. So in terms of Rupajanas, Arupajanas, is it important to go beyond the 4 jhanas?
Well, I mean, they're good, like baseball cards, they're good to have, if you can do them. But that will be a long talk on how you do them. But I give you the first step, which is to get the breath to stop. And you don't force it to stop, it just gets the breath energy in the body is so full you don't need to breathe. And then the shape of the body begins to dissolve away, and you have these spaces between these sensation dots. You go to that sense of space, you realize there is no end to that space. It penetrates the walls, it penetrates the glass, it penetrates everything. That's the first formless jhana. So get there, and then we can talk.
Thank you.
Because jhana is like eating food. I mean, you just sit around eating food all the time, you get fat. You've got to, you've got your strength, and you learn to use it, you exercise it.
Would it also depend on the person's karma and temperament and character as to whether they develop just the Rupajanas, or not just, but the jhanas, or it goes beyond that?
Some people are more inclined to be quiet than others. Some people find it easier. The people who find it more difficult do, however, tend to be more thoughtful about what they're doing. Ajahn Fuang's comment one time, is that meditators fall into 2 types: those who think too much, and those who don't think enough. There is no third. And so for those who don't think enough, they do tend to get quiet really easily. but then they have trouble using that quiet to analyze things. Whereas the ones who think too much have trouble getting quiet. But once the mind does get quiet, then they have a tendency to analyze what's going on in the mind.
Can people get stuck in their practice when they just really enjoy that quiet and
Oh
they
yeah,
don't use
people
it?
can get stuck for years.
How do they become unstuck?
Realizing that it's not enough. And either someone else has to convince them that it's not enough, or they begin to see for themselves that they can't depend on that stillness all the time.
Would contemplation help?
You know, contemplating the state of mind and seeing, okay, can I really depend on this? Sometimes you've been practicing jhana and it just falls apart. That's when you realize, okay, I've got to do more work.
Thank you. Someone has asked, for Ajahn students who have experienced the first stage awakening, how have their lives changed? I am interested in how the lived experience of awakening unfolds and why we should be inspired to set our goals as such.
Well, the experience of awakening, the first step of awakening is that you have seen that there is a deathless element. And so, you know, there's an aspect to the mind or something that the mind can touch that will not die. That gives you a lot more confidence. The fact that, okay, this body may die, but that's not the end. At the same time, your doubts about the Buddha are gone, so you live a much more confident life. Now, first stage awakening does not change your personality that much. There are a couple of cases in the canon of people with difficult personalities who were still difficult after they became stream avatars.
Thank you, Ajahn. And is body disappearing an essential part to the experience of emptiness or sunyata?
And sunyata is basically empty of disturbance. And I mean, in the emptiness of awakening, there is no sense in the body at all. So for the ultimate sense of emptiness, that would be a necessary thing.
Yes, thank you. And someone has asked, is there such a thing as an original mind?
Everybody's mind is original. I mean, they use the term jit in Thai, which can be translated as primal mind or original mind. And basically what they're trying to say is that there is a quality of just knowing. But that's not, I mean, there's the just knowing of the consciousness aggregate, and then there's the knowing of the awakened mind. And they're two different things.
Okay. When you talked about that first stage of awakening and that experience, is that a experience that happens once, or is that something that will happen again?
Happening once is enough to count as awakening,
Yeah.
And then the higher stages of awakening will happen after that.
Okay. Someone has asked, for someone who's experienced trauma, what practices would you recommend for them? Would you recommend for them to practice mindfulness or do psychotherapy first?
They've experienced what? What was trauma?
Someone who's experienced trauma, would you recommend for them to practice mindfulness or do psychotherapy first?
If you do psychotherapy, you've got to get a good therapist. And mindfulness, it depends on what kind of mindfulness you're talking about.
Okay. And do we need other ancillary meditations, or is mindfulness of breathing enough to take one to enlightenment?
Well, the Buddha said it was enough. But it's good to have some auxiliary topics just in case.
Again, dynamic practice depends on what we
right.
need. Okay, someone has asked, when I meditate, I come to a state where I can let go of my breath and focus on an empty mind, like empty space, but I am not sure how to or what to do with this empty space.
You see that it's fabricated. See that you have to put it together in order to gain that, and you have to put it together to maintain it. So you look for basically looked at in that emptiness, there will be levels of stress that go, very subtle levels that will go up and down. You have to look for that. When the level of stress goes up, you ask yourself, what did I just do? When the level of stress goes down, what did I just do? And then you begin to see, okay, it's not just empty on its own. I'm creating the emptiness.
Okay. When is the right time to practice alone, away from a teacher?
When the teacher's not around.
Great
There are no
answer.
hard and fast rules about these things. Although I did notice with Ajaan Fuang that my first year with him, sometimes I would be sitting with him and meditating, and he had this habit of being able to read people's minds. It was really helpful because he could see what you're doing wrong, and he'd say, do this, do this, do this. And you did that, and you're getting results. And then he realized that you're depending too much on him, and he chased you away.
Okay. Can you please talk about the skillful use of conceit or pride in the practice? Skillful comparison of oneself to others' practice and one's own practice.
You don't compare your practice with other people's practice. You do compare your practice with your own practice. That you're getting better. Because that gives you encouragement to go, okay, I can see that I'm actually benefiting from this and that I'm doing better. And that gives you the energy you need in order to keep practicing. But you never compare your practice with other people's.
Yeah. What's the difference between the knowing of consciousness and awakened mind?
The knowing of consciousness is fabricated. The awakened mind is not.
Could you elaborate on that?
You have to have intentions in order to know things with the consciousness aggregate. There's an intentional element there. The awakened mind is what's discovered when all intentions have been allowed to drop away. Even the intention to drop things is not there either. And then the unfabricated will appear.
Because you get to that stage where there's nothing else to drop.
Right.
And that's the awakened mind.
The awareness that you realize or that you attain is the awakened mind.
Okay. And what is the most misunderstood aspect of right view in the West?
It's hard to know where to begin. I think one thing that's pretty rampant is the question of if you had to choose between the three characteristics and the Four Noble Truths as being the most basic teaching of the Buddha. A lot of people would say the three characteristics. The Buddha himself wouldn't have said that. The Four Noble Truths are the most basic teaching. It's one of the few teachings that he said is categorical, which means it's true always and everywhere. And the important thing about the Four Noble Truths is that they carry duties. Suffering and stress are to be comprehended. The cause is to be abandoned. The cessation of suffering and stress is to be realized, and the path is to be developed. So knowing those truths gives you an idea that when you encounter any of these four things, you know what to do. And that within that framework, the three characteristics or the three perceptions are one of the things that help you to comprehend suffering and help you to abandon the cause. But they have their time and place. They're not true across the board. And if you just took them on their own without having the background of the Four Noble Truths, you could come up with all kinds of ideas. Life is impermanent, go out and get drunk.
So would you say that
I'm serious. You need the Four Noble Truths to give you guidance on what to do with those three perceptions.
So would you say the Four Noble Truths is a lot more comprehensive in what we need to do compared to the three, what they call the three characteristics? And sometimes people talk about the three characteristics in the term of the three Dharma seals, in that if there is any teachings that have anicca, anatta, dukkha, that is the Buddha's teachings. So that's also something that people have said as well. Is that anywhere in the suttas, in the canon?
No.
Yeah. So no Dhammasils. No mention of the term 3 characteristics, nor 3 marks of existence.
This is one of the advantages of having the Pali Canon on a CD-ROM. You can check which words appear in the Pali Canon, which ones don't. And the word dilakkhana, with 3 characteristics, does not appear. Anicca lakkhana does not appear. Anatta lakkhana does not appear. There is a sutta called the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, but that name was actually given later. It's not in the canon. So the Buddha refers to these things as perceptions. And again, they're perceptions that you use on the path to help comprehend suffering and to abandon its cause.
Cool. And someone has asked, Bhajanga Sutta is a good refresher to use as part of meditation practice. Would this be suggested when approaching higher practice, pure awareness samadhi, non-duality, neither perception nor non-perception?
Which sutta was?
Bhajanga.
I didn't, what?
Bhajanga Sutta?
Oh, the Bhajanga, okay.
Sorry, my Aussie accent to it.
I'm sorry. I'm trying my hardest. I should say that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So,
It's an ongoing joke.
yes.
Yes.
Who has the accent?
The Aussies. Okay, so with this sutta, is that a good refresher to use as part of meditation practice? Would this be suggested when approaching higher practice? For example, pure awareness samadhi, non-duality, neither perception nor non-perception.
Okay, the Buddha warns you about perceptions of non-duality, that those are not the highest practice. That the perceptions of non-duality are fabricated. Now, the Bhojangas, the 7 factors for awakening, they basically come down to how you develop mindfulness using discernment, how you use discernment to develop mindfulness into concentration. You work on your mindfulness, you use your discernment to see what's skillful and what's not skillful. And then you try to develop what's skillful, abandon what's not skillful. And that way you get your mind into concentration. That's the purpose of those 7 factors for awakening.
Is it sequential in experience?
In some cases it is. In some other cases you have to emphasize the more active ones because your mind is sluggish. Other times you have to emphasize the more calm ones because your mind is agitated. But there is a kind of a sequence. Yeah.
Okay. And someone has asked, Ajahn, what is your view on the practice to cultivate 7 factors of enlightenment as part of calming the mind? So connected to that.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's how you understand applying discernment to your practice of mindfulness to turn it into concentration.
And then from there, the others as well will follow.
And then you use more discernment to refine the concentration, to refine your and make more advances on putting it into suffering.
When you get to the end,
then you use the equanimity as a basis for more discernment.
Yes. So it gets deeper and deeper
Right.
in that practice. Thank you. Okay. And someone has asked, how do you apply discernment?
You ask questions. And the basic questions come down to what's skillful, what's not skillful. And the Buddhist part of discernment is seeing things as separate. We tend to think that means seeing discernment is seeing the oneness of all things. The Buddha never said that. You're seeing the cause and in any case where the cause and the effect, see that they are actually 2 different things. So you know, okay, if the effect is something unskillful, you want to abandon the cause. So those are the kinds of questions you ask.
Someone has wanted to take this back to basics. What's skillful and what's not skillful? How do we know?
Skillful is anything that helps put an end to suffering, helps put an end to harm. Unskillful is what leads to more harm, more suffering, more disturbance. And the question gets more and more refined as you go into deeper states of concentration. So in, say, the first jhana may not be harmful, but it's more disturbed than the second jhana. So you go for the less disturbed state.
And so it's also giving up something that is of a lesser fulfilling, lesser skillfulness to something that is higher.
Right.
Yes, and then you continue with that.
Right.
Yep. And so another question. For those who are training to become meditation teachers, what principles should they follow to stay true to the Buddha's teachings and
Never sell the teachings.
never sell the teachings?
No.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Never sell.
They sell it. It's not a transaction.
It's not a transaction. That's number one. And if you're a layperson, have another occupation so you're not trying to make a living off of the teaching.
Mm.
Because it's so easy to get influenced by your audience.
Mm.
I knew one teacher who told me a really good story one time. It was about a behavioral psych class at, I guess it was MIT.
Mm.
And the professor had this habit of pacing back and forth in front of the room as he gave his lectures. And so the students, being MIT students, said, well, let's do a behavioral psych experiment on the teacher. And so when he was in this corner of the room, they paid attention, they took notes. And when he was in that corner of the room, they looked out the window, talked with each other, nobody took notes. And it wasn't long before they had it in the corner.
Mm.
He stayed, and he didn't know what was happening. And this is what happens to teachers who are sensitive to the, you realize you teach about karma, you teach about rebirth. And after all, you stop teaching about it.
Mm.
So it's important that you not make your livelihood depend on the teaching.
Mm. And related to that, even if people aren't in it for the money, so to speak, but maybe it's because they feel they want more people to come to the event or hear their teachings, so become more popular. Does that also apply to that as well?
It applies to that situation too, yeah.
Yeah. So really focusing on teaching the Dhamma and what's required rather than just what's popular.
Right, because you're trying to give the Dharma to people who are worthy of the Dharma, and you're not just trying to water it down for everybody.
Mm. Mm. And earlier you were talking about what people may or may not want to hear. So right view, it also mentions that there is this world and the next world, i.e. the existence of the next life after death. Can Ajahn share any stories on rebirth to increase our confidence in this aspect of right view?
I'm not a fool. I mean, there's nothing where you can prove this to anybody. Even the Buddha didn't try to prove it to people.
Mm.
I mean, he would talk about the rebirth as a fact, and basically it's up to you to decide whether you want to take it as a working hypothesis or not.
Mm.
But you're not going to know the truth of rebirth until the stream entry.
Mm.
When you step out of space and time, you realize, well, that was a long time I just stepped out of. Didn't go back just to whatever year you were born, but it goes way, way back.
Mm.
You may not know the details of previous lifetimes, but you do know that this has been a long, long time in the coming.
Mm. Mm. Okay. Related to that, on teaching rebirth or karma, what's the discernment between teaching what the audience is interested in different contexts versus watering down the Dhamma?
When the question of rebirth comes up, you don't fudge it.
Mm.
I mean, there's a lot of the Dharma that you can teach without having to refer to it.
Mm.
But then there are other things that you have to refer to, and then you refer to it.
Mm. Someone's mentioned, this clicks, true teacher never sells. Hey. Oh, and then Ethan, year one Ethan, has said, is the triple gem the best type of gem in Buddhism? Is the triple gems the best gem in Buddhism?
Yep.
And he's
What are the
even
gems
drawn
would
a
you-
little gem.
Okay, what other gems would you have?
Okay. Ajahn, can you talk about the power of confidence and conviction?
Okay, the power of confidence is what gets you up in the morning. But this is going to be really good, even though it's difficult.
Mm.
And it's learning how to talk to yourself and seeing the challenges as fun. That this is something I can do, and I enjoy challenging myself.
Mm.
So you have confidence in the teaching that, yes, this is going to take you to a good place.
Mm.
And that's part of what enables you to say, okay, I'm going to push myself a little bit harder,
Mm.
demand something more of myself than I had before.
Mm. Okay, John. Earlier we were talking about training teachers and being teachers. Someone has asked, when does one know when they are ready to teach?
If you can talk about, I mean, if you know for yourself what the Buddha taught was true.
So speaking from experience rather than from books, for example.
Yeah, and also notice when he says that there is a deathless, you know that, yeah, there is a deathless.
Have to get to that level.
Yeah.
Ajahn, how could one balance the practice of meditation and the studying of texts or Dharma talks?
Personally, I found that the practice will go back and forth. That there'll be times when you just want to understand what the Buddha taught. Other times when you say, I've got enough understanding, I really want to focus on my meditation. And you put the books aside, and then after a while you begin to run into problems in the meditation, and you realize, I need help. That's when you go back to the books, or you go back to a teacher. Then you get the help, then you move on.
It all comes back to us and our practice to make it real.
Practice comes first.
Yes. Okay. And one common difficulty that we face is practicing meditation regularly. Do you have any advice for us who have the right intention to practice but somehow cannot maintain a routine of daily practice?
One thing I found helpful is tell yourself that no matter what, once a day I'm going to get into the meditation posture. I don't guarantee how long I'll stay, but I will get in, just sit in the meditation posture. And if you find, okay, this is all I can do for today, that's it. Most often, once you've gotten into the meditation posture, you say, well, I get out. Or give it 5 minutes, give it 10 minutes. So you're not embarrassed about yourself. But make that, what's difficult about maintaining a practice is you say, okay, I'm going to sit for half an hour every day. And you run into a day where you can't do half an hour. And that knocks you off. Whereas you say, okay, I'll sit in the meditation posture at least once a day. That's something you can do. And then if you want to sit longer than that, that's fine.
And related to that, how do we uphold the practice in lay life and orient ourselves towards the Dhamma?
Keep listening to the Dhamma. Don't put so much time into screens.
This is useful for now.
No, really, I mean, so much of our time gets wasted by TV and internet and all these other things. And also the values of the media are basically that the important things in the world are things that other people are doing someplace else. The Buddhist teaching, the important things in the world are things you're doing right here, right now. So it's a matter of values, not just time.
And someone has said, you mentioned Ajaan Fuang said we have to be crazy about meditation to succeed. How does one implement this advice?
Well, it's the same thing as about being crazy about football or something. That you find that you're interested in it, and when you have a spare moment, you go check the football scores. And when you have a spare moment, you meditate. When you have a little time here, you're sitting in front of the stoplight at the intersection. And so you meditate until the top light turns green. Little things like that. You just keep pursuing it and finding that the problems that come up in the meditation fascinate you. That this is a problem, I want to figure this out. You enjoy figuring things out. That's how you get crazy about it.
So interest is really important.
Interest is important.
How does one develop interest?
Again, seeing it as a skill. And think of any skill that you've mastered before and how you, in your spare time, you worked on it. And then you found that there were challenges, but you could figure these things out. And the more you figure it out on your own, the more fun it is.
And in some ways, when we get a little bit of the results, when we figure out something, gives us confidence to then figure something else out and keep going.
Right.
Yeah, great. And Ajahn, how does one overcome the constant, strong desire to figure out the true nature of reality?
Are you suffering from the true nature of reality? You're suffering from your greed, aversion, and delusion. So try to figure those out.
Yeah. And how does one then deal with finding out their greed, hatred, and delusion? I think earlier you were talking in another talk about finding the weakness in our greed, hatred, and delusion. So maybe to share that with everyone.
Okay, when you find that you have a particular defilement, you have to ask yourself, what's the allure? Why do I like this? And part of you is saying, I hate my anger, I don't like my anger. If you really hated it, you wouldn't go for it. There's something inside you that likes it. This is where it's useful to think about the mind as being like a committee. There are lots of yous in there. And so which me in here likes the anger and why? And then try to figure that out.
Thank you. And Ajahn, for those Buddhists who are married and practice together, do you have any advice on how they could support their practice and each other and each other's practice?
Okay. Volunteer to do the dishes so the other person can meditate. In other words, give each other time. That's the important thing, give each other time and opportunity. I know one couple, they build a little hut behind their house so that they can meditate. And so part of the year, the husband will meditate, part of the year, the wife will meditate.
They take turns.
They take turns.
Great. Can they do it together?
Who's going to cook?
Cooking at hands, everyone. Bulk cooking. True. You do not want to see the screen. Someone wrote on the screen, here you go, Tina and Zen. Okay, so can you please talk about skillful uses of becoming in daily life?
In daily life? Okay, basically you've got your role as a member of your family, you have your role as a person at work. You say, okay, I want to fulfill these roles skillfully. And then ask, well, what would be the skillful way of dealing with these things? Also seeing that, identifying yourself as a meditator, you're here to develop the perfections. So when, you run into obstacles at work, you remind yourself, okay, this is an opportunity to develop equanimity, it's an opportunity to develop determination, it's an opportunity to develop endurance. See the difficulties as challenges for developing your perfections.
So does that mean you could also have a wholesome becoming as well?
These are all wholesome becomings, yeah.
Yeah. So not all becoming is bad.
Oh no, you've got to use becoming in order to go beyond becoming.
Which is what you talked about yesterday with
Right.
the raft. Yeah. Okay. And someone has asked, what does it mean to have an expanded or contracted mind in relation to the perception of our senses?
Perception of what?
Expanded or, well, they said contacted mind in relation to the perception of our senses.
Okay, the expanded mind is like when you have the mind, like the enlarged mind of meditation. And you're seeing things in a larger context. The contracted mind is when you are feeling overwhelmed by things. And you lack the energy, you lack the perspective in order to not suffer from these things. So you get overcome by your defilements. Whereas your expanded mind, one of the images the Buddha gives is make sure that your goodwill is expansive like the earth. And it's people who are trying to make life difficult for you are just like one little man coming along with a bucket and a hoe. He's trying to make the earth be without earth. And he spits here, and he digs here, and he urinates here, and urinates there. But his efforts are puny compared to the size of the earth. So in the same way, you want to have your goodwill to be expansive and enduring. Always hold that in mind.
And just on about expanded and contracted, in meditation, we could also have this awareness where it could be something that is quite expansive, a bit like a floodlight, or it could be something that could zone into one spot, like a spotlight. So in that sense, which one would a practitioner use for their meditation? And is it just different tools for different purposes?
They're different tools for different purposes.
Mm.
Sometimes a very focused awareness is useful for some things.
Mhm.
And then sometimes you need the more expansive one. The more expansive one is more conducive to discernment. The focused one is more conducive to just intense concentration.
Thank you, Ajahn. So when we're doing the body contemplation, that's more the expanded one then.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Someone has asked, do we actually secretly like all our defilements?
Do you actually what?
Do we actually secretly like all our defilements?
Of course.
Maybe not so secretly sometimes.
And sometimes it's not secret at all. Sometimes you're pretty blatant on it. How much more time do we have?
We have perhaps one more question. And Ajahn, if you had one parting advice to give us folks in Sydney, what would that be, Ajahn?
Practice more. Of course, that applies everywhere.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ajahn, for your teachings, for your time, not just in Sydney, but all of the time when, Ajahn, you've got such a busy life where you're just devoting your life to the teachings and to sharing the Dhamma. And we're very, very grateful.
Thank you for